Hi, everybody. Welcome to Summer Fishtrap, the first full day of events and readings and workshops. My name is Mike Midlow. I'm the program director here at Fishtrap. And today, a group of writers has been busy in their first workshops and attending events, hopefully already scribbling stuff down, inspired by what they got in their workshops and events, and just by being a part of this group of writers at Summer Fishtrap. I also want to welcome all of you in the greater Fishtrap world who are watching this via fishtrap.org or on Fishtrap's YouTube channel. This reading features Beth Piatote. Beth has been a part of Fishtrap for a long time. She's one of those people, I love these stories, who started out as a participant, as a registrant in a workshop some years ago. And now for the last 3 years, this is the third year now, Beth has been an instructor. It's a great thing, and really makes me happy. When Beth sent me her workshop description, it made me so happy. It was titled 17 Ways to Write About a Fish. It still makes me happy to see it. And all of you in her workshop, I hope you're just already producing tons of work and being inspired. And Beth was just telling me how much she's enjoying all of you. Beth is a writer of fiction, poetry, essays, plays, and scholarly works. Her 2019 mixed genre collection, The Beadworkers Stories, which she read from at the 2019 Summer Fishtrap Gathering, was longlisted for the Aspen Words Literary Prize and the Bingham Prize for debut fiction. It's a great book. I suggest picking it up. Some of our book clubs in Wallowa County have read the book, and everyone gets something wonderful out of it. It was also shortlisted for the California Independent Booksellers Golden Poppy Award for fiction. Her play, Antíkoni, was selected for the 2020 Festival of New Plays by Native Voices at the Autry and is continuing in development. Beth is Nez Perce and is devoted to the Nez Perce language and literature, as well as indigenous language revitalization more broadly. This place, the Wallowas, is her homeland, the Nez Perce, but she lives in California. She is an associate professor of comparative literature and Native American studies at the University of California in Berkeley, although she's not there right now. We'll find out more about that in a second. Her new projects include a book of poems and a novel. Beth also writes with a collective of Nez Perce creative writers. I've heard about this. Beth, can you tell us more about this collective of Nez Perce creative writers?
Tatsalach katsiyo to Fishtrap and ka oikalo. Today I am calling in from Nez Perce homelands, from Seminican Bay, from Lewiston, where I'm staying with my cousins for a couple weeks and also doing some work with the Nez Perce language program in Lapwai. I'm really happy that last year at Fishtrap, I read some of the poems I was working on using creative writing for language revitalization. And since then, we've started a group of 7 of us who are all Nez Perce creative writers and artists, performers, and language activists. And we meet every week on Zoom, and we're about to have our first ever Homelands writing retreat next week. This has been facilitated by a partnership with Fishtrap and the Josephi Center and the Wallowa Homelands Project. So for us, it's very joyful to return to our language, return to our homelands, to speak our language with each other in our homelands. The name of our collective is Lekuptsime, which means the North Star Collective. Lekuptsime means without movement. And so it's a reflection of our steadfastness in our commitment to our language and to our homelands and to each other.
Thanks, Beth. That's wonderful. Beth is going to do a reading for us today. I don't know what it's going to be, except she described it as story time. Tell us a story.
Okay. So I had to rearrange my screens here for a second. Well, I want to thank Sharma Shields because she's done many, many generous, lovely things for me. And one of the things that she did is she connected me to the Washington Humanities organization. And they have an annual fundraiser called Bedtime Stories. And last year during the pandemic, they invited me to write a story for them based on the theme, The Night Shift. I love writing prompts. I love being challenged to do something that is sort of outside of what I'm thinking of. And so it was during the pandemic, and I had written some kind of dystopian short stories. And my kids were like, why don't you write something happy? And so I thought, well, this is bedtime stories. I love a good story before bedtime, something that's going to give me good dreams. And at that point in the pandemic, I was like, the only thing I want to give with my art is joy and comfort and hope and just some little package of beautiful things. So I hope that that will be your experience of hearing this story. It is just story time for you. Get out your gin and tonic or your milk and graham crackers, whatever makes you feel relaxed and happy. The name of this story is The Night Walk. After his disappointingly chaste dream about Brad Pitt, Rowan realized he had to up his sleep game. During the pandemic, his friends had been extravagantly gifted with dreams, describing nocturnal hours filled with adventure, romance, and fabulous sex. In his dream, Rowan had been on a movie set with Brad Pitt, and when Brad embraced him off camera, Rowan had rebuffed his advances, saying, "No, Brad, I respect you as a person." In the dream, Rowan had earnestly desired Brad Pitt to feel loved for who he was, a whole person with insecurities and disappointments, and not just a gorgeous movie star ready to hook up. But the next day, Rowan cursed his subconscious. "Idiot," he muttered as the words, "No, Brad," jolted around his head like bumper cars. "What were you thinking? Who curves Brad Pitt?" Rowan worried not only that his sexual appetite had malfunctioned, but that he was in the middle of an entire systemic breakdown. Rowan turned to his friend Ted for advice. "It wasn't a one-off," Ted said. "I'm sure you have it in you to mac with Brad Pitt. And besides, Brad Pitt isn't for everyone." In truth, Rowan wasn't sure that he had it in him. He was 2 years past the divorce, with only minor flirtations and occasional Hueys to patch him through. And he wasn't as young as he used to be. The Brad Pitt dream was nearly age appropriate. This was yet another disappointment. During the pandemic, Rowan's primary companions had been houseplants in despair. He lived alone and without the usual fodder of the gym, parties, and the office to support his social metabolism, he felt bereft. Now the weekly staff meeting appeared as a delightful mirage of human connection. He longed to make photocopies or to stand in line for coffee. He was lonely. Some days he went to bed and woke up with the exact same thought: I will sleep alone for eternity. Rowan had accepted the fact that there was little he could do to control daily life, but he was not ready to admit that he could not control, or at least influence, his dreams. He needed to live the life he was missing, if not by day, then by night. He had grown up hearing stories of old-time Indian men, his great uncle among them, who could change the weather. Dreams seemed a modest reach compared to a lightning storm. Ted said Rowan needed to make friends with his subconscious, and that meant no more dream shaming. With proper appreciation, perhaps Rowan could persuade his mind to reassemble the pixels of the Brad Pitt dream and give it another go. This seemed a bit high level to start, so Rowan began with the mundane, sleeping on the other side of the bed. He moved the nightstand to the unused side and placed a blooming orchid next to the lamp. That night, he took a warm bath and slipped into his favorite boxers, then glided through some gentle stretches. His body felt alive and open and ready for a fabulous date with his own imagination. He lay down in a kingly pose, palms faced upward. "Come at me, universe," he said, and soon entered a deep golden slumber. 2 hours later, he jolted upright. Too hot. Where was he? He kicked off the blanket. He turned to his side. He went to the bathroom. He paced. He ate a bowl of cornflakes. He did a crossword puzzle. He watched a rerun of The Andy Griffith Show. Would he dream of a young Andy Griffith? Maybe, if he could sleep. He looked at the clock. It was 1:32. He folded himself into fetal position. He begged for sleep. All night, he battled to reclaim the left side of the bed, the side that had been left. The next morning, he swore at the mirror. Was there a sleep deprivation equivalent of hangry, slangery, slurious? You can't fight your animal nature, Ted said, and urged Rowan to double down. Get outside, pee on something, go foraging. Rowan struck out by foot that afternoon, headed northeast, away from his regular routes. Not exactly the wild, but the best he could do. As he walked, the street and yard became novel, each one a possible source of treasure. He stopped at the blue house with blackberry bushes sprawling over the fence. Rowan tested one, then plucked a handful. You making a pie? Rowan stepped back and looked for the voice. It came from the balcony. A handsome man, middle-aged, sat at a cafe table with a book and a can of no-lie IPA beside him. No, Rowan said, just snacking. Ah, curse the bad luck, the man said. You've got a lot then? The man smiled. You're familiar with the iceberg theory? Rowan smiled too, imagining a vast tangle of berry vines on the other side of the fence. The ones on the alley side are riper, the man said. Help yourself. Thanks, Rowan replied. And come back when you want to make a pie, he said. Rowan smiled and nodded, then made his way down the alley. Foraging had become unexpectedly pleasant. Soon he had filled the bag and glanced back at the balcony. The man was again reading the book. Thanks, Rowan called out, and the man looked up and waved. Rowan cut across the park on his way home. The lawn was dotted with families and couples lounging in blankets and college students playing badminton. How normal everything seemed, Rowan thought. And just then, a doe darted out from a thicket and ran. Rowan froze. More alarming than the sudden eruption of movement was the fact that no one in the park seemed to see her. The couples continued to gaze at their phones and each other. The families ate their sandwiches, and the shuttlecock floated over the net. Did you see that? He called out to the couple near the path. That deer? The pair looked up at him, then around the park. They shook their heads. Rowan followed the doe, crossing the park and turning down a side street. There he came upon a plum tree with branches laden with fruit. The purple orbs released easily into his palm, and he picked 5 to carry home. That night, Rowan dreamed of the blue house and the tall fence around it. He was walking along the fence, and the man in the balcony was on the other side. He could feel the man's presence, a delicious tension between them. But the fence, the briar of thorns, he was certain that if he followed the fence, he would come to a gate. A pink sky saturated the scene with a rosy glow, and Rowan's heart bloomed. Finally, he came to an opening and crawled under the thorns. But when he arrived on the other side, the house was gone, and so was the man. The pink sky remained, and the land of tawny hillsides opened before him. The land felt both magical and familiar, just as the man had felt known to him, while yet a stranger. Obviously, something inside of you has died, Ted said the next day. Wait, what? You're dreaming about a fence, a briar, and a desert, he said. Try to be more open. Rowan objected, but Ted's interpretation stuck. Later that day, Rowan walked to the park and sat on the bench, hoping that the deer would reappear. Instead, a man approached him. The man's clothes were clean but rumpled, and he carried a dingy rucksack. His shoes curled upward. The man was in his 50s, with a trim beard under his mask, curly hair, and blue eyes. The man walked directly to Rowan, who had never felt so trapped in the wide open. Can you help me? He asked. Rowan reached for his wallet. No, the man said. Can you help me write a letter? Maybe, Rowan said. Ted's words flitted across his brain. It's for my girlfriend, he said. The man sat down and unzipped his bag, extracting a notebook and a card with metallic stars and planets on it. Can you write on this? Rowan looked at the card. I can't write, the man said. But you have a notebook there, Rowan said, and I'm sure your girlfriend would rather see your writing than mine. The man began to repack. No, I always do it this way, he said. She knows it's my words. The words, be more open, floated across the sky. Wait, he said, I'll do it. Rowan took the card. The man opened his notebook, which was filled with letters and symbols. Dear Maura, he said, I have traveled through time and galaxies to be with you. I came to Earth to become a dinosaur and then a human. I didn't want you to leave, but once you decided, I couldn't stop you. I ran after you, but you were gone. I had to come to Earth to find you and remind you of your power. Rowan penned each word as elegantly as he could. The man smiled, satisfied. It's true, you know, the man said. She was right beside me, then I turned and she was gone. The dinosaur time was rough. Thanks for your help. Rowan was certain that the man was homeless, and he was certain that what the man said was true, though he didn't know how. That night, Rowan dreamed that he was on a tropical island. He was visiting friends who lived in a cluster of houses beside the ocean, and each house had a canoe. Around him, children were playing and women were cooking and gossiping. The air was thick and held a charge of anticipation. A rainstorm was on its way. Rowan felt in every way his boy self, with skinny legs and cut-off shorts and excitement to play with the other boys. Then he noticed that rather than running, the boys were flying like little flying saucers. Rowan discovered that he too had this ability. He sat cross-legged and used his arms as levers, lifted off the ground and cruised smoothly around. He delighted in this discovery of his new power, and he felt pure happiness as he flew with the other boys, chasing each other through the groves of palm trees, dodging houses and dogs, and knowing they were free to play until they were called for dinner. The dream seemed to restore something in him, perhaps some optimism that had been stripped away by the divorce, the pandemic, or belly flab. He channeled his energy into a massive purge of housewares. By nature, Rowan was tidy, but after having experienced the smooth pleasure of self-propelled flight, he longed to be unburdened by things, especially things that reminded him of his previous life: the casserole dish, the wine glasses, the birthday watch, the half set of bath towels. All day, he went room to room, plucking items off shelves and emptying drawers. He made 4 trips to Goodwill and 1 to the dump. On his final return, feeling sweaty and satisfied, he stopped halfway up the walk. A package was waiting on the porch. Cruel joke, here was the Hydra's head. But it wasn't. Turning the package over, Rowan recognized the handwriting. He opened it and read the card. Hey, Neff, went to the mountains with Rosie and your cousin Eugene. Got 9 buckets of hucks. Gathered some pisco medicine for you. Love, Unc. P.S. Rosie wants to know what's good on Netflix. Rowan unwrapped the package. 2 bags, one filled with dried Indian tea and the other with dried huckleberries, plus a vacuum-sealed package of smoked salmon. For a long moment, he held the open package in both hands, thinking about his family. That night, Rowan brewed a cup of pisco. Indian tea. He held the cup to his chin, inhaling the forest smell. That night, he dreamed of walking along the Columbia River, the water shimmering in late afternoon sun. His skin warmed in the light, and he became aware of an older man walking beside him. On the other side of the river, bluffs rose up from the water's edge. He could smell the bright scent of fish in the water and hear the grasses shuffle and shoo in the wind. Before him, he saw the shadow of a great bird in flight and looked up to see an eagle the size of a plane crossing over him. The path before him curved gently upward, away from the river, and soon he found himself walking through sage-covered hills, pungent and alive after rain. The sky turned a fantastic color of pink. He felt a doe walking beside him. He turned to look, and she leapt into the sky and flew away. The sky faded to a deep blue, and as stars began to appear, he found himself walking among them, not flying, but walking through the sky with Grizzly Bear and the wolves and the North Star. And here he felt most serene as he walked among the stars, greeting each one as an old friend. Yokkalo, that's all.
Thank you, Beth. Wow. How did you take us on a journey from Brad Pitt to walking in the stars in 20 minutes? That was so wonderful. All of your writings like that. Now's the chance for all of you folks, if you want to ask Beth some questions. We've got about 20 minutes if you want to. I really want, I'm still floating in that story, but I know that all started out that for most of your career, you've been an academic, writing serious papers and research. And when did short story and creative writing become such an important part? Has it always been, or is this new? Yeah, can you talk about it? How you balance the two? Because I know a lot of people here might be technical writers during the day or academics as well, but they take these moments to tell stories.
Yeah, I've actually always been a creative writer, and being an academic has been my day job. And I always just wrote for myself, for my own pleasure. And I think I still, I continue to do that. I continue to write for myself. But now I've been fortunate that I've been able to find publishing outlets for my creative work. So all the time that I was doing I've always had a job writing. I was a journalist previously, and then I went to graduate school and became a academic, but I've always been writing short stories on the side, and that's why I came to Fishtrap 20 years ago and then had a big gap and then came back. So I just encourage everybody to write all the time, write whatever genre is calling you, let pieces be what they are.
Wonderful. Alexander comments, it feels like as adults, you've given us permission to indulge in the bedtime story form. What led you to this form, voice, and light, bright energy found in this story?
Well, it was the pandemic, and I really at that point in the pandemic, it was last summer, I just wanted to be able to deliver something that was comforting and beautiful. And I feel like that's a really important thing. And just in my own writing in my journal every day, sometimes I'll feel like I just need some comfort or I want something else. And so I have this series of things that I write called like Imaginary Life, number 43 or whatever. I just give it a number and then kind of describe these other worlds of, talking horses and things like that. Whatever it is that I need, I just create that on the page and give that to myself. And so, yeah, with that assignment of writing a bedtime story, that's all I wanted to give. I do want to say that I did intentionally try to bring in some Nez Perce aesthetics into the writing of this piece. And so, the importance of the number 5, the sort of thinking about the plants and animals and stars that are all part of the Nez Perce cosmology. So even though it was kind of a universal bedtime story, there were also aspects of it that were very specific to being a Nez Perce person.
That makes me think, of traditional European story forms and Native American or indigenous story forms. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you're braiding them together? If that's the truth.
I knew how. I think I've been studying Nez Perce language, and I've been learning it through studying the stories and understanding the grammar. And I think that those story forms just have kind of created a rhythm inside of me to create stories with different kind of narrative arcs than the kinds that I'm used to seeing in other forms. But I'm also just really interested in genre and thinking about the different things that different genres do. And so I just really encourage people to be very open to working across genres and thinking, well, what can I do in a list poem that I can't possibly do in a flash fiction piece, or, just trying to match things to their genres. I think it's really important to study a Grimm's fairy tale and understand what its form is as much as it is to study, a short narrative that's a Nez Perce story and see what its aesthetics and its structures are.
Who are some of the Nez Perce storytellers that you look up to and recommend for us, if any?
Well, I've been reading mostly some of the older narratives that were recorded in the 20th century, way back now. But there are so many Native writers and Native performers coming up now. Michael Wasson is a very prominent Nez Perce poet. There are many Native people who are finding more publishing outlets, and I completely support their work coming out.
I'm also interested in the story form of short story. What attracts you? I know you've written poetry and longer works, but what attracts you to the short story?
I love a short story because the only sort of formal requirement is that it's short. So, and I love that there are certain things that only a short story can do. It can help you sort of assimilate a moment that can't really be digested in some other way. It can take you somewhere briefly. It can just transport you in different ways. Also, I just saw Sharma's question in the chat about using humor. I definitely think I get that from listening to storytellers. And a lot of times I'm inspired as I'm sitting there by myself of thinking, oh, what would crack up this person if they were sitting at the table with me? And so I think that I think humor is a really important aspect of writing and of moving a story from the page to giving it life, is the sort of punctuation and sort of recentering that humor can do in a story. Thank you, Sharma. I'm glad you think it's funny.
Oh gosh, you cracked me up 10 times during that. It was good. Also, the other thing I really loved about this, and maybe the rest of you did too, are how you decorated the story with casserole dishes and fences and shuttlecocks going over nets. Do you keep lists of these things and then populate your stories with them, or are you just bubbling along while you're writing the story?
I think, maybe things kind of, yeah, of course I take little notes as I go along in life of things that I notice and want want to use someday. Every once in a while I go back through my journals and try to mine stuff, but mostly it is just kind of trying to imagine things. The little episode in the story about the homeless guy who comes and says, will you write a letter for me? That was something that actually happened to me. So I'm like, I got to use this someday. So I was really happy to be able to find a place for it in this story. Yeah, I think details, yeah, that's part of the joy of being a writer, is figuring out, oh, where can I put this so that it comes back around in this way later? Or what's going to be the most, like, what is the saddest, remnant of a failed relationship? Has got to be the Tupperware or something. It's like, that's the stuff that stays behind. Yeah.
Splitting up records, stuff like that.
Have to tell set. Yes, the 50% of the stuff you used to have.
Susan has a pretty deep question that I think, because she asks how verbs and nouns might differ between Nez Perce and English. Oh, yeah.
This is the core of everything. So Nez Perce language, like many indigenous languages, is verb-centered, which means the verb, that most words are formed through verbs. And so there's a verb in the middle of the word, and then you have some prefixes that provide the who and the how, and the suffixes are the when and the where. Often when you're trying to make something into a noun, you're making a verb of what it does and then giving it a noun suffix. Or if you want to say what someone does, like a teacher is a sepahetemenawit, is someone who causes other people to learn. So you have these suffixes that create nouns more than you actually have freestanding nouns. We do have a number of freestanding nouns, and of course names and things like that, but most of the language is, verb centered. And so that creates certain patterns in storytelling. It creates certain rhythmic structures, but also it organizes the world in a very specific way, so that since subjects and objects are attached to verbs, you can't really think of a subject taking action with an object without being imbricated with it. And I think that's a very profound way of thinking. You also can't really describe motion without there being some kind of place marker saying, I am here, or the thing is moving that way, is moving away from me or toward me. The sound is coming from that direction, things like that. So it's a very sort of relational way of thinking in terms of where you are in time and space. We also have different temporal markers. So a lot of ways to talk about, I'm about to do this, I am doing this, I just did this, I did this in recent past, immediate past, remote past, I did this, this was happening in myth time. And one of the joys of reading the old stories is to see the temporal movements across, where in the same story, you'll be moving across time zones from remote time into present time. And so I think one of the ways that comes out in, like the story that we just heard, is there was a sense of movement between like sort of unstructured time or myth time, remote time, dream time, and the immediate presence, in the way that they can exist in the same story, can exist and shape each other. I wanted to write about a story about it because during the pandemic, it's like, what can I control? Almost nothing. So the idea that this guy thinks, well, maybe I can control my dreams, maybe I can have better dreams. And as the things that he does to try to improve his dreams then start like changing his like everyday life. And it creates this sort of feedback going back and forth. And I think we can have those kinds of relationships with time and ancestors and places and beings.
Wow.
That was a very
Thank you.
wide-ranging answer.
Yeah. There was a lot. There was a lot to unpack there, and still more. We could keep going. The other thing I was thinking about was just the joy and even energy that and how it seems like you just can't wait to tell these stories, to make up these stories. So many times writers are like, oh, it's this is so hard. And there are other people on this Zoom call who have also during the pandemic rose and found brought joy to people in different kinds of ways. And this certainly was an example of that. Hey, I think all of us would value, if you feel like it, if you would teach us a greeting or two in Nez Perce that we can use during Summer Fishtrap Week with each other.
I would love to do that. I really hope that as our collaboration continues, that we can all be up there in the Wallawas saying Tatsmewi, good morning, crow, and speaking to our land in our language. So if you just want to start your workshops every morning saying Tatsmewi, and you can write it down any way you want to. Write it down phonetically, tots, that's good, and mewi, that's morning, tots mewi.
And as we conclude the day of Summer Fishtrap, how can we say?
Well, now we're sort of in that time in the afternoon, so tots halach.
Tatsala.
Tots halach, very good. Tots.
And how about we'll see you tomorrow? Or I will see you tomorrow.
Hechnu. You guys, you all. Hech, I'll see new, future. Hechnu.
Well, Beth and everybody, et hechnu.
Yoko.
Beth Piatote, thank you so much for being a part of Summer Fishtrap all these years and into the future. It's always a joy to have you, and all of you lucky people in Beth's workshop and everybody in the Summer Fishtrap community this week. We'll have lots of opportunities to meet up. And all of you folks out there in the greater Summer Fishtrap world who are tuning into this at fishtrap.org or on Fishtrap's YouTube channel, thanks so much for being a part of this. Let me tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. It's already been a big second day. Tomorrow is Wednesday, July 14, and you'll have your morning writing workshops, as you all will all week. Tomorrow at 1 p.m., Joe Wilkins will give his faculty reading. At 2 p.m. for just the Summer Fishtrap registrants, there's a craft talk from Jason Graham, also known as Mosley Wada, Hold Your Doubt Like Gold. At 3 p.m., another faculty reading from Whitney Chandler, who's teaching our younger youth workshop. She is a delight. And at 4 o'clock tomorrow, faculty reading from Janae Brown Wood, who's teaching the children's literature workshop this week. This will be her first. This is her first Summer Fishtrap reading, and you will not want to miss it. So, thank you all. You can all meet in the Summer Fishtrap community and write down your ideas, and we will all see you tomorrow. Thanks for being a part of this and for attending all these things, and I hope you're having a great time.